Israel, as it engineered starvation, it's engineered also the chaos. They don't want to see any kind of safe, dignified distribution. And in the same time, Israel also during this war destroyed 99% of the agriculture, the lands and farms and different food resources in Gaza. So people became totally dependent on the humanitarian aid. If there is no humanitarian aid, people are starving. About 950,000 children who are all suffering from malnutrition. About 300,000 of them are suffering from acute malnutrition, which affect their lives. So the numbers of 500,000 and more, it's only in Gaza City.
I mean, there are thousands of infants in Gaza who are deprived of breastfeeding due to the ongoing crisis over there. And this must have a huge impact on the health and survival of these infants.
They are dying in silence.
Despite this collapse, and more importantly, how is this collapse affecting the ability to treat patients, and how are people managing? Because as somebody who's not in Gaza, you would think that there's just no hope. There's just no avenue for treatment.
Don't say that there is no hope. This is the only thing keeping us alive. Will everything run out? Only hope. And we are trying our best to keep it as much as we can. And we get it from our children. When I'm visiting some sites, to see the children, how they are committed to the learning spaces.
Welcome to another episode of Gaza Stories. I'm your host, Muneef Khan. The occupied Gaza Strip is facing a deliberate famine imposed by Israel, collapsing hospitals and daily targeted attacks on civilians and aid workers that have killed and displaced thousands since October 7th, 2023. Over 640,000 people are at risk of starvation. Before I introduce my guest, I would like the audience to know a few numbers. The latest escalation, firstly, is part of the long standing and unresolved Palestinian question dating back to the 20th century. Now, coming to the numbers, according to a United Nations report, at least 1.9 million people, or about 90% of Gaza's population, have been displaced by Israeli forces. Reports from the Gaza Health Ministry and the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs show that casualties include 217 journalists, 120 academics, and 224 humanitarian workers, which include 179 UNRWA staff. A study by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights found that 70% of fatalities were in residential areas and that were of women and children. Today, we speak to Amjad Shawa. He is a human rights advocate and the director of the Palestinian NGO Network, and he joins us from Gaza. This is Gaza's story told by those who live it. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for hosting me.
And so my first question would come directly to the famine. Now, according to the UN-backed Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or to say shortly, the IPC, over 640,000 people in Gaza are at risk of famine by September 2025. You've described this as a deliberate famine, as an act of genocide. But I'm going to ask you a very naive question for our viewers to understand. Can you explain how Israel's blockade and aid restrictions are contributing to this crisis?
The IPC was to declare Gaza as a famine zone was very late for us. Although that we were warning for a long time that Gaza is suffering from severe starvation imposed by Israel. From day one of this war, when the Minister of Army in Israel declared clearly cut of different aid supplies, food, water, electricity, medicine to Gaza. And what had been entered after, very small quantities of aid supplies after this international pressure, which was calculated by calories. And it was day by day till we have the collapse of the ceasefire on the 2nd of March 2025, when they closed it totally and denied the entry of everything. Nothing entered to Gaza till the end of May. Very small amounts of aid supplies, which was entering till now. And the new Israeli strategy that this aid not to have an access to the distribution point, to the aid agencies. Israel, as it engineered the starvation, it's engineered also the chaos. They don't want to see any kind of safe, dignified distribution. They push this small aid supplies to roads, which is controlled by gangs, to be sold in the market with four times prices, whilst the people lost their incomes. So they misled the international community to show, look, we are getting an aid, but on the fact, they are not. These gangs are working under the protection of the Israelis. And in the same time, Israel also, during this war, destroyed 99% of the agriculture, the lands and farms and different food resources in Gaza. So people became totally dependent on the humanitarian aid. If there is no humanitarian aid, people are starving. So the Famine declaration was supposed to be 4 or 5 months ago, when once the bakeries stopped working because no flour. At the same time, community kitchen stopped working because of there is no supplies to cook. And when I'm talking about meals, the meals which is only rice, some bread, spaghetti, some lentless soup. This is the only things. I'm not talking about this nutrition chain and supplies which is supposed to be. So you can imagine that these infants, that their mothers cannot breastfeeding them on time, there is no milk. And every day we are losing lives of these infants. Pregnant women, we have 50,000 pregnant women with no food. So there is concerns about this intergeneration of the children, about 950,000 children who are all suffering from malnutrition. About 300,000 of them are suffering from acute malnutrition, which affect their lives. So the numbers of 500,000 and more, it's only in Gaza City. And I'm talking about elders. Elders now that they no medicine, no food. Also, some cases at thalassemia, as gluten cases, that they are need special food, and cerebral palsy, and these cases who denied food and medication. So they are dying in silence. Whilst all, yeah, please.
If I may interrupt, coming to your points I wanted to ask about infants specifically in Gaza. I mean, there are thousands of infants in Gaza who are deprived of breastfeeding due to the ongoing crisis over there. And this must have a huge impact on the health and survival of these infants. But can you tell us, because you are on ground, as to how organizations on ground are dealing with this crisis, especially when it comes to infants who are dependent on breastfeeding?
You know what had been entered to these agencies only respond to 10% of the needs. So sometimes we have to share these milk powder cans, which is supposed to be for one infant. We can share it. The mission now, how we can do our best to keep them alive, which is impossible mission in these conditions. And just to tell you, I cannot exclude famine from whole context that we are in, that people are under such attacks, daily airstrikes, forcible displacement, sometimes for 20 times and more than. This kind of mental health that these people are suffocated and they're facing. Also the issue of water, which is something that very critical. Almost all the population are suffering from severe water insecurity. The share of each Palestinian, it's less than 5 liters a day for drink and for daily use. So people are dependent on insecure water resources. I have to tell also about the health system, that 82% of the health facilities is out of service. The deficit on medical supplies, it's more than 55%. The occupation percentage in this 18% of these facilities, it's about 300%. Patients, injured people on the corridors. So how I can deal with this infant, with this malnutrition children, whilst these facilities is overwhelmed, overoccupied. So we sacrifice with high priorities. Sometimes these injured people, these infants, I cannot understand how these medical teams are working while we lost thousands of medical teams. They lost their lives because of the Israeli attacks. And there is hundreds who were also arrested or detained by the Israelis. So it's something that it's now about 23 months of such genocide war with all aspects. It's not only famine.
And so, before I move on to my questions about the mental health and the health system, one question which I want to ask, and this is something I observe personally when I'm tracking the news on social media and other news platforms, is the attack on aid distribution centers. You yourself have said that aid distribution centers have been targeted, resulting in several civilian deaths. But can you tell our viewers about these incidents and the impact on aid seekers trying to access food and medicine, because they are largely helpless?
Yeah, thanks for this question. You know, we as national NGOs, we were the main responders and frontliners for this crisis. We are part of the social fabric. We are with the people. And we are working hard in order to respond with whatever we have. Through the small community kitchen that we are doing, through these small clinics and medical points that we are working through, psychosocial support, these temporary learning spaces that we created for education and at the same time psychosocial support for people, for the children. People with disability, to continue the issue of rehabilitation. We have been faced so many challenges. The attacks on our premises, for example, we lost about 80% of our premises. And one of them, it's our bingo office, our network office, which is totally destroyed. And most of the NGOs the same. But we also lost our colleagues. We recorded about 230 of our aid workers. As UNRWA, lost 360. As Civil Defense, 93. As Red Crescent Society, about 54. As other UN and international organizations. So it's about more than 700 of aid workers were killed, and also other hundreds were injured. But we have this high commitment to continue the work with our people. And this is something also part of our commitment and our principles as a humanitarians. While the Israeli occupation ignore all conventions and laws. So this is something that express also the failure of the international community to have this protection for civilians according to their responsibilities, according to the different laws and conventions. Israel is using aid as weapon to use starvation and to push these starved people to go to a so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is part of the Israeli mechanism, which is kind of also killing traps for people to go seeking aid. And every day from day one of this of the work of this GHF, every day we do have tens of people killed or injured. And instead of being back to your children, to your malnourished children, with some food, you are back as a body, or injured, or you to lose your limb. So many cases on this regard documented every day. So the issue of medicine that you mentioned is very important. Nowadays, whilst we have chronic patients, about 15,000 patients and injured people, bad need for mid-evacuation outside Gaza Strip. They need for surgeries, or they are cancer patients, they need special treatment. And every day we are losing part of these lives. On time also that we have these chronic patients who need special medicines. Until now, we have very limited amount of emergency supplies which is getting in. Whilst these cases are not receiving their medications, they have critically deterioration in their lives and health conditions. And sometimes it's moved to be kind of this permanent disability for them.
And so, if I may come back to patients and the safety of patients, I want to talk about the healthcare system. Now, I've been actively speaking to doctors in Gaza since October 7th, 2023. These include doctors such as Hassan Abu Sitta, there's Dr. James Smith, who had volunteered in Gaza, and countless more who I'm still in touch with. And many of them, like even if we look at the numbers, had flagged that by October 2024, and I say this as per my own analysis of reading reports, more than half of Gaza's hospitals were made non-functional because of the Israeli strikes. And many health workers were killed or displaced. We all saw the images of the blast or the strike at Al Ahli Hospital, right? But despite this collapse, and more importantly, how is this collapse affecting the ability to treat patients, and how are people managing? Because as somebody who's not in Gaza, you would think that there's just no hope. There's just no avenue for treatment.
You know, don't say that there is no hope. This is the only thing keeping us alive. Will everything run out? Only hope. And we are trying our best to keep it as much as we can. And these doctors and physicians are working with this hope. If they lost it, you cannot imagine what they are doing miracles. With nothing, they're doing a lot.
I really admire the strength. But please, sorry, continue.
And we get it from our children. When I'm visiting some sites to see the children, how they are committed to the learning spaces. That although that they are malnutrition, they are scared, they have nothing. And in the morning, they have to go to Tikiyas, the community kitchen, to collect maybe some dishes for back to their families. Or to go to track water tracking to collect some water back. But they are, and you know that the Israelis deny the simple things for them, the papers, the pencils, the colors, and they consider it a dual use. And it's not a humanitarian item. But all of this, they are coming. So I'm inspired by these children. I'm inspired by these women who their life 100% changed. They lost their home, part of their families, but they are struggling to keep the other part of the family alive. So we have 49,000 orphans, other tens of thousands widows. So these cases give you hope when the Gazans failed the Israeli plans of deportation and they went back to Beit Hanun in the north. When they are still staying in Gaza City, all of that, the Israelis put pressure by airstrikes, by artillery, by all means that they use, by causing starvation, but still there. So the case here that we are talking about, how these physicians are working in the hospitals and these medical teams with nothing sometimes to work, to do a surgery on the corridor. And sometimes I could witness, I was in the hospital when one of these physicians received the body of his children. It's not the first case, it happened so many times. When he back to his family, which is starved, and he couldn't be back for days, and they are staying in a tent, scared, but he's very committed towards his responsibility to give life to the others. So this really give us more energy while we lost it because of food. And to tell you that we lost big hospitals at the European hospital, as it's in the south, which is a specialized hospital for cancer, for heart patient. When you lost also the three main hospitals in the north. So we're talking about Shifa Hospital, which is a compound, medical compound. Now it's working with a small bar because it's collapsed. So we have sometimes to manage things. And again, the issue of protection is the high priority, as food, as water. I cannot say only that Gazans need food or some kind of supplies here and there. And to tell you, there is no hygiene kits, for example. To tell you that in Gaza City only, there is 250,000 tons of solid waste in the neighborhoods. Beside the sites, Israel denied the removal of this solid waste to the dump in the east part of Gaza City. So it's create kind of contagious diseases. While we have this humidity, this hot weather, people in under tents, it's boiling, no water, no hygiene, no sanitation. So the case here, this condition create no immunity that people could affected or infected by such diseases, which weaken these bodies.
And so, I wanted to come to the psychological impact on the population since we talked about children. The ongoing, I would call it a genocide, has caused widespread trauma, especially in terms of mental health challenges. I'm not personally aware of what the numbers are in that case. But can you tell us about organizations addressing these challenges in Gaza? Are they able to address these challenges in Gaza? Because the visuals that we see, especially coming out from hospitals, especially being documented by journalists, are beyond horrific.
I'm the deputy chairman of Gaza Community Mental Health Program. So part of my job is to follow also this psychological issue and the mental health. Yeah, there is big increase of numbers of these cases became patients who need medical treatment. And I'm talking about children, teenagers, about youth. Last night, for example, no Gazans could sleep because of the intensive airstrikes.
This is the 29th of August, which you're saying last night.
Yes. So it's to lose your beloved one member of family, friend, classmate, to lose your home, your school, the opportunity to get education. For the third year, no schools. These youth that they lost everything. So it's became by day trauma. If she need, and there is, I can tell you that we have psychological first aid points that it's working in different corners. And we have strong volunteers that they're working in the sites to do psychosocial support for the children. It's not enough because just leave. And after that, we have back and back to the same story. So it's a critical issue. And in all aspects, that we cannot respond to all these needs over the capacity first. The second, while this military operation is continuing, it's very important. It will be very complicated to respond properly towards these needs. As a humanitarians, we have to stop this war in order to have the recovery and to respond to all these needs.
You talked about loss, losing a beloved, losing a classmate, losing the school you studied in. And I do want to ask you a personal question about loss itself. Everybody in Gaza that I've spoken to, I mean, we had Dr. Ahmad Al Makadma, who unfortunately was mercilessly murdered, and many other people have passed since October 7th. Everybody in Gaza that I am in touch with has lost someone close to them, someone they know, or their house. What is your story in this case, sir?
As I said, all of us lost beloved ones. I lost number of my aunts, and they couldn't move out of Gaza. And they stayed at their home. They were elders. And their sister, she is a physician, she stayed with them. So she just 2 days before, she phoned me. She watched me on the TV. I was in Dar it was this place. So she wanted to ask about us, how things are moving. Then we had that the Israelis getting Shifa hospital, and they are living in the neighborhood which is near to Shifa hospital. There were 7 people. There was an airstrike towards their home. I have good relation with the UN agencies and with ICRC, so I phoned them. Please go to evacuate them, to help them. For 3 days, no one could reach them. All the 7 were killed. And the same for me in Dar al Bala, one of my colleagues. In the morning, I met him. In the night, I received the news that he and his family were killed. So it's, and as you said, there is a big number of friends were killed, relatives. My brother-in-law also was killed. So it's very painful. And sometimes, you couldn't bury your friends or your relatives. And when you are inside, and there is no access, or that he's still under the rubble of this home and you have no equipment and no capacity to get him out. So it's and the painful that there is the everyday phone calls that you are receiving about patients who's in need for medicine or med evacuation, and you are handcuffed, or some people are asking for tent or asking for some food. So it's unprecedented, ever never in the West nightmares. I have been to the different contexts, to Syrian refugee camps in Lebanon, Jordan, in Turkey, in some African context. And I learned about other wars, about humanitarian catastrophes, but on such things, we do feel, and I do ask my colleagues from the UN, from the NGOs, who are coming from Afghanistan, from never to compare with any context. This is something completely different, and I doubt that the world could witness such thing.
So this does bring me to my final two questions. One question which I want to ask you as a Palestinian who is in Gaza is that despite all of this evidence, despite all of these images coming out, despite all of this is possibly the most well documented genocide ever. Still, there is a narrative parallel to this which tries to discredit it, which tries to deny the famine, tries to deny the atrocities in Gaza. As somebody who works in an NGO network, as somebody who is in Gaza, what do you have to say to that?
As you say, it's well documented. It's live war. When the Israelis attacked the hospital and killed the journalist, it was live. When the IBC was issued, it's a live document and everyone could receive it. But the international community failed us from day one and failed us for ages. Until now, they are failing us. It's unprecedented in Gaza, but could be copied in other contexts. Since the absence of accountability, the absence of embargo and sanctions, give Israel the opportunity to do more and more. If Israel will go forward, reoccupying Gaza City, rest of Gaza City, we will be in unimaginable situation. No one can understand what will happen. I have this scare inside. There will be tens of thousands of victims. There's families who have patients, elders, people with disability. Also malnutrition children. If they will be displaced and they are in bad need for medical treatment, if they will be displaced, they will lose this opportunity. So will be their case, they will have deterioration or will be dying. This is the real time for the international community to act, to stop this, to stop this military operation, and to stop the war.
And so you talked about accountability. You yourself have called for legal prosecution of those responsible for attacks on civilians at aid distribution centers, for instance. And with international institutions dragging their feet on this, what hope do Palestinians have for justice? I know you've spoken of hope, but specific to this, what hope do Palestinians have for justice?
We are, as Palestinians, committed to human rights principles, the international law, to the international humanitarian law, to the UN conventions, to justice. And the absence of all of these led to the situation that we are suffering from. We will continue. This is because this is the only weapon that we have. We will continue documenting and raising and advocating till we convince this world that's what will happen here will be shame forever. The shame on history and the humanity. Because the silence towards these crimes led to the situation that our children killed, malnutritioned, and suffocated in this condition. But again and again, we rely on the people, not on the politicians. We rely on these people, on these students, on these lawyers, and these journalists all over the world who get our voice and became the voices of the victims. So we are looking forward that they can make big change for us and for them.
I really appreciate you, sir, taking out the time to join us from Gaza. I know it's a very difficult situation there. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you continue to do what you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's all the best. Thank you.